You're still watching Today with myself, Mfundo Mabalane. Now, university students could be paying more this year for both tuition as well as accommodation. The Department of Higher Education has proposed that universities increase tuition fees by 4.3% and student accommodation by 6.3% for 2022. CEO of University South Africa, on the other hand, says the fees would need to increase by 5% just to cover basic inflation-linked costs. Let's bring in Asive Dlanjwa, spokesperson of the South African Union of Students, for more reaction. Asive, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. What do you make of the current proposals from both the Department of Higher Education and University South Africa?
Thank you very much for having us. We think that the proposal has no basis. We reject it, and in fact, yes, we do not accept it for many reasons. We do not believe that this is the time for us to be increasing the cost of education, particularly at the time in which we find ourselves.
Just talk to us perhaps of the current challenges faced by the youth in pursuit of their education. What would this mean for them if we talk increase now in 2022?
It would be absolutely devastating. Number one, majority, well, not majority, but there are thousands of students whom their parents and their legal guardians have lost income due to the pandemic, either because they've been retrenched or because their salaries have been cut. So this would be absolutely devastating. Now, one would advance the argument that no, but the majority of poor students in any case, or in fact, they will be funded by the state, by NSFAS. And as true as that, one of the biggest challenges that we are currently having in the sector right now is what we call the missing middle. These are students whom we are saying that they are too poor to be able to afford their own education, but also NSFAS regards them too rich to be able to pay for them. It's a big cohort, hundreds and thousands of students that are caught up with them that have to pay their own way, number one. Number two, all students that entered higher education before 2018, where they were evaluated against the previous threshold of 120,000 per annum bracket, not the 350,000 per annum. So some of those students are still, and we know this is a huge cohort because our numbers tell us that less than 30%, our throughput rate is less than 30%, meaning that we still have more or less about 40 to maybe even 50% of the students who were doing 3-year degrees who started in 2018 or 2017 that are still in the system. Now, those students have to pay for themselves. So, and these are the students that are suffering, number one. Number two, even the argument of NSFAS falls short because NSFAS has said that they are forecasting a 10 billion rand shortfall in the funding, which can even be more for this current academic year. If you cannot afford if government themselves cannot afford to pay those tuition fees, and yet they're increasing fees, this will only mean one thing, that they are going to start doing tactics as they started towards the end of the year to try and reduce the number of students that they are funding by introducing ridiculous policies such as you would have to pass 80% of your modules for you to be funded for the following year. All those are silly things. So we really believe that this is not the time for that increment. And lastly, the argument made by USEF of 5% falls short because for the last 2 years, many expenses, including overheads and all of those expenses of the institution, were at a minimum because the students were not there. They were not paying for lights and water at the extent which they were paying because majority of the students, they were not there. They were not paying the staff that they would have otherwise had to pay, especially support staff, because the students had not been there. At the residences, the students were not there. So you wonder to yourself, where is this? They should have caught up, in fact, now, because for the last 2 years, their expenses have been at a bare minimum. The only reason they want this is so...
In terms of SOS, they have said that this, in fact, if they don't allow for an increase, it would erode the buying power of the universities because we know it's in rand-dollar exchange. So wouldn't you say that that argument would hold?
Reprioritize. If you reprioritize, you will have more income at your disposal to be able to put towards other areas where obviously we appreciate that there's inflation. But if you reprioritize and you rebudget, there will be more money for. Let me give you an instance. The only reason that they want, I can promise you one thing, as a matter of fact, is that they, for the last 2 years, and even this year and next year, they will carry on to increase their salaries. They are getting paid, some of them, 4-5 million rand per person, vice chancellors, per annum. These are just principals of institutions. So yet their salaries will carry on to increase their meal. They are millionaires. That is the only reason they want this increment. So that among themselves in those rectorates and those senates, they're able to feed each other. Because what justification is there that in a public institution, in some of the worst performing institutions in South Africa, their vice chancellors are getting paid millions of rands and their GBCs. So if they reprioritize and they take that money to where that money is needed, they will not have problem. And
you know that the salaries conversation is worth a broader conversation, I must say, Asive. The salaries one is worth a broader conversation, but I want to take you back to the missing middle element, because I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought there. If we go there, that is an age-old problem. How much have you done as a student body, so to say, or student union, to actually agitate for this grouping to actually be prioritized as well? Because we're talking here about your nurses' children, your teachers' children. Most Africans are nurses and teachers and most certainly cannot afford, if they've got 3 or even 2 children, to pay for university.
You are absolutely correct. We have been advancing this argument time and again, year after year. We have even gone on to put on proposals on the table as to how we can try and assist this cohort of students. But there does not seem to be willingness politically and otherwise from our government and from institutions to cater for this group. The reality is this: we can only advance and agitate. And in every time we have taken to the streets to protest, in our placards and in our demands, the issue of the missing middle has never failed to find expression. Maybe what we need to do is to do what we did in 2014, 15, and 16 and shut down all institutions of higher learning such that they can realize that this which we are raising is serious. Because we have been raising it time and again to say, what are you doing about the students? The only thing Blade keeps on saying is that, no, we are working on this. I have put together a task team to try and evaluate this. There is absolutely nothing that is forthcoming. Unfortunately, we don't have the money. If we had the money, we would put on the money and say, let the students study. The only thing we can do is to agitate. But I think maybe you are correct. It is time that we elevate our cries and elevate them to the streets, so that government and all in sundry can realize that we have a crisis on our hands.
Now, you guys are academics, if you will. Do you have perhaps a proposal that has been drafted of the solutions to the 5% increase that SOS is proposing, or the 4.3? Do you have solutions on paper at least to present to these two?
No, we do not have yet. In fact, we do not have solutions or rather proposals based on the increment for many reasons. Number one, the books and the financial statements of each institution, of all the 26 institutions, they will differ from one institution to the next. So we probably will not be able to come up with a blanket approach to say, because if you take the University of Stellenbosch and you take Zululand, one thing is guaranteed: whatever proposal you come up with, it is not going to, you cannot implement it the same.
But you've got representatives in various universities. You've got representatives in various universities that can put together all the suggestions, as simple as you guys being the central body facilitating that. Each of the representatives in those universities come to you, put together proposals, you compile that and you present. Because I think in most cases, part of agitation is actually putting forward solutions so that they see the options and not just where somebody's highlighting the problems.
Absolutely. Let me maybe also give you, and so that you can understand this. SRCs, all of them across the country, they are full-time students who have to pass like all other students who, by the way, will get a stipend of 1,500 rand per month. And then you've got bloated vice chancellors and their whole executives that are all of the millionaires with research capacity that is worth billions of rands. How? Number one, firstly, it is to identify the challenges and identify those things which we deem to be an impediment to the well-being, the teaching and learning of students. We do not have, it's a reality, we can't run away. I don't even want to lie to you. We do not have the capacity to put proposals that are toe-to-toe with institutions and management, because they have the research. We must be able to say, try and move in this fashion and ensure that you do not disadvantage the missing middle students. And then it is their responsibility, using the millions that they pocket every month and their research capacities, to go and come up with models that are justifiable and that maintain and uphold values of social justice. We wish we had that. These are full-time students. How are full-time students going to be? The proposals we are talking about, these institutions are multi-billion rand institutions. We are not talking over a one-page proposal when it comes to increment. You are talking hundreds of pages, and you must be able to speak to every item where the university receives money and spends money. We just don't have that capacity. It's a reality. So we would not even begin to clown and say, no, there's a counter proposal. But we must be able to identify the loophole, well, not necessarily the loopholes, but the shortfalls and the strengths of the proposals that are brought forward by the institutions using the capacity that they have. We don't have that capacity.
All right. Now, Asive, thank you very much, though, for your time. That was Asive Dlanjwa, spokesperson of the South African Union of Students.